The clock strikes 6:40 p.m. at Huntsville State Penitentiary on April 23, 2025. The execution chamber falls silent as Moises Mendoza takes his final breath. Strapped to a gurney, his eyes scan the room one last time. Witnesses, officials, family members of his victim. The deadly cocktail of chemicals already flows through his veins. Moments earlier, he spoke his final words. "I am deeply sorry for the endless pain and suffering I have caused. To the family of Rachelle Tolleson, no words can undo the harm I've wrought." Then, turning to his own family, he whispered in Spanish, "Estoy en paz." I am at peace. But peace was something Rachelle Tolleson never found. 21 years earlier, this 20-year-old mother's life ended violently at Mendoza's hands. Her 6-month-old daughter Avery left alone, crying in her crib. The back door ajar. Furniture overturned. Blood spatter on the wall. A mother who would never return home. How does a man come to terms with such actions in his final moments? What thoughts consume him as the lethal injection begins its work? The psychology behind a killer's last words reveals more than just remorse. It exposes the complex reality of human darkness. Have you ever wondered what happens in that execution chamber? The calculated precision of state-sanctioned death? The silent witnesses? The final meal that serves as a condemned man's last connection to life's simple pleasures? Every year, families across America fall victim to predators hiding in plain sight. Ordinary people who transform into monsters. Neighbors, co-workers, former classmates, just like Moises Mendoza was to Rachelle. The truth about Mendoza's crime and his journey to that execution chamber contains lessons that might save your life one day. The warning signs, the red flags, the behavioral patterns that precede violence. If you want to understand the criminal mind in its most vulnerable moment. Facing imminent death, hit subscribe now. This channel dives into the darkest corners of human behavior to extract the lessons that might protect you and your loved ones. This is the story of a brutal murder, a 2-decade wait for justice, and the final hours of a man who knew exactly when and how he would die. Rachelle O'Neal Tolleson never reached her 21st birthday. At just 20 years old, the young mother of Farmersville, Texas embodied quiet determination. Friends described her as someone who lit up every room, with a laugh that made others join in whether they got the joke or not. Her world revolved around 6-month-old Avery, the infant daughter for whom she had paused her nursing school dreams, promising herself she'd return once Avery was older. Her small 2-bedroom home on Maple Street housed modest ambitions. Photos of future travel destinations pinned to a corkboard, nursing textbooks stacked neatly on a shelf, and a calendar marking the date she planned to resume classes. March 18, 2004 was supposed to be an ordinary Thursday. Rachelle had scheduled a pediatrician appointment for Avery in the morning and planned to meet her mother for lunch afterward. She never arrived at either. By 2:15 p.m., her mother's calls went straight to voicemail. Concerned, she drove to Rachelle's house. The front door was locked, but something felt wrong. Using her spare key, she entered to find Avery alone, crying in her crib, hungry and distressed. The living room told a violent story. An overturned coffee table, a broken lamp, a blood-smeared handprint on the wall. The back door stood open, swinging gently in the March breeze. Would you recognize the warning signs if someone you knew harbored violent intentions? Could you sense danger from a former classmate who seemed normal on the surface? At 25, Moises Mendoza presented a study in contradictions. Standing 5 feet 10 inches with a lean build, he moved with calculated precision, whether stocking shelves at the warehouse where he worked or maintaining his meticulously organized apartment. Former co-workers described his appearance as forgettable: close-cropped dark hair, brown eyes that rarely maintained contact during conversations, and a habit of keeping his head slightly bowed when speaking. Born to Mexican immigrants who settled in Texas when he was 4, Mendoza navigated 2 worlds, speaking Spanish at home while excelling academically in English at school. Teachers remembered a quiet student who turned in assignments early and avoided group projects when possible. His permanent record showed no disciplinary issues, just a pattern of minimal participation and occasional counselor referrals for withdrawal from social activities. After graduating with average grades, he cycled through 5 jobs in 3 years, each departure explained by seeking better opportunities, though supervisors noted his discomfort with authority and tendency to observe female co-workers from a distance. His apartment contained evidence of obsessive organization, books arranged by height, canned goods with labels precisely aligned, and a calendar where he documented his daily activities in minute detail. What no one witnessed was his growing fixation on women who rejected his rare advances. A journal found during the investigation revealed a mind that interpreted casual dismissals as personal attacks. "They look through me like I'm invisible," he wrote, "but someday they'll all see me." This private rage existed alongside his public persona. The helpful neighbor who assisted elderly residents with groceries, the dutiful son who visited his parents every Sunday, the quiet man who blended seamlessly into the background of everyday life in Farmersville. Moises Mendoza had attended high school with Rachelle 3 years earlier. Former classmates later recalled him as quiet and mostly forgettable, the type of person who blended into the background. What no one knew was how he had fixated on Rachelle since their junior year, collecting photos of her from yearbooks, following her social media, learning her routines. Police later reconstructed the sequence of events through physical evidence and Mendoza's eventual confession. He arrived at Rachelle's home shortly after noon, claiming his car had broken down nearby. When she allowed him to use her phone, he attacked, first striking her with a heavy object, then binding her wrists with electrical cords cut from her own appliances. He forced her into his vehicle and drove to an abandoned property 8 miles outside town. There, in a dilapidated shed, he sexually assaulted her over several hours. When she fought back, screaming for help, he strangled her until she lost consciousness. The medical examiner would later determine that the strangulation alone might not have been fatal, but the 4 precise stab wounds to her throat certainly were. The methodical nature of what followed reveals a calculated mind. Mendoza wrapped Rachelle's body in a tarp and transported it to his cousin's remote property. When night fell, he doused the body with gasoline and set it ablaze. After the fire consumed most identifying features, he disposed of the remains in a creek bed, weighted down with concrete blocks. Have you ever wondered if someone in your life might be wearing a mask? The neighbor who watches too closely, the acquaintance who asks too many personal questions, the former classmate who suddenly reappears after years of absence? For 3 agonizing days, Rachelle's family and the entire Farmersville community searched desperately. Flyers with her smiling face appeared on every street corner. Local news covered the disappearance nightly. Volunteers combed through fields, woods, and abandoned buildings. Meanwhile, Mendoza returned to his job at a local warehouse, carried on normal conversations with coworkers, and even joined one of the search parties, standing shoulder to shoulder with the family whose lives he had destroyed. The most frightening aspect? No one suspected him. Not a single person noticed anything unusual about his behavior in the days following the murder. March 21, 2004. A county road worker noticed unusual tire tracks leading to Willow Creek. Following them, he discovered what appeared to be charred human remains partially submerged in the shallow water. Within hours, the quiet creek transformed into a bustling crime scene. Forensic teams in white hazmat suits, detectives photographing every detail, and police divers searching the murky waters for additional evidence. Detective James Morales, lead investigator on the case, faced the most challenging aspect of any murder investigation: identifying the victim without clear physical features. Fire had consumed most distinguishing characteristics. Yet hope emerged when the medical examiner found an intact molar with a distinctive crown, one that matched Rachelle Tolleson's dental records. The confirmation hit like a thunderbolt, Morales later wrote in his case notes. We shifted from a missing person investigation to a homicide in that instant. But who would commit such a calculated act? The community of Farmersville, population 3,118, had recorded only 2 homicides in the previous decade. Everyone knew everyone, or so they thought. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Stacy Marie Garcia, a 24-year-old cashier at a local convenience store, contacted police after seeing Rachelle's photo on the news. Her hands trembled as she gave her statement. Moises came into the store around midnight on March 18th. He seemed different, agitated, buying bleach and trash bags at that hour. When I asked if he was okay, he laughed in this hollow way. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I finally took care of a problem that's been bothering me for years." Have you ever had that gut feeling about someone, that instinct warning you something wasn't right? How many times have you ignored it, telling yourself you were overreacting? Garcia's statement provided the first real lead. Detectives quickly discovered Mendoza's connection to Rachelle through high school yearbooks and social media. When they pulled his credit card records, they found purchases matching the time frame: duct tape, gasoline, cleaning supplies. Cell tower data placed his phone near Rachelle's home during her disappearance and later near the creek where her body was discovered. Within 48 hours, police obtained a search warrant for Mendoza's apartment. What they found confirmed their suspicions: blood-stained clothes soaking in bleach, Rachelle's driver's license hidden in a vent, and a disturbing collection of photographs, surveillance-style images of Rachelle going about her daily routine, some dating back years. On March 24, 2004, exactly 6 days after Rachelle disappeared, tactical officers surrounded Mendoza's workplace. Security cameras captured his expression changing from confusion to resignation as officers approached with weapons drawn. He offered no resistance. During the subsequent 14-hour interrogation, Mendoza initially maintained his innocence. Detective Morales employed a strategy of presenting evidence piece by piece: the tire tracks matching Mendoza's vehicle, fiber evidence linking him to the crime scene, cell phone data tracking his movements. Finally, at 3:17 a.m., Mendoza's facade cracked. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said, his voice barely audible on the recording. "But once it started, I couldn't stop." The confession provided details only the killer could know: the specific location of the assault, the number and placement of stab wounds, and the method used to dispose of evidence. The information in true crime stories might save your life someday. The warning signs are often there before violence erupts. If you agree that awareness is protection, take 2 seconds to hit like and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. The Collin County Courthouse fell silent on January 17, 2005, as Moises Mendoza entered for the first day of his capital murder trial. Dressed in a navy suit that hung loosely on his frame, he avoided eye contact with Rachelle's family seated in the front row. For the next 3 weeks, Courtroom 4B would become the center of a community's search for justice. Prosecutor Rebecca Martinez opened with a statement that set the tone. "This case isn't about whether Moises Mendoza killed Rachelle Tolleson. The evidence will prove beyond any doubt that he did. This trial is about ensuring justice for a young mother whose life was stolen, and a baby girl who will grow up never knowing her mother's embrace." The prosecution methodically constructed their case like architects building an impenetrable structure. DNA evidence recovered from beneath Rachelle's fingernails matched Mendoza's profile with 99.98% certainty. Soil samples from his vehicle contained the same distinct mineral composition as the creek bed where the body was found. Most damning was the video confession, played in full for the jury, where Mendoza described each horrific detail with unsettling calmness. Forensic psychologist Dr. Eleanor Wright testified about the items found in Mendoza's apartment: the collection of surveillance photos, diary entries about the victim, and meticulous notes on her daily schedule indicate long-term planning and obsession, not a crime of passion or momentary impulse. The defense team, led by public defender Thomas Reeves, pursued a strategy focused on Mendoza's mental state. "My client's actions, while inexcusable, stem from severe psychological disorders that went untreated throughout his life," Reeves argued. He presented evidence of Mendoza's troubled childhood, documented depression, and social isolation. Dr. Raymond Castillo, testifying for the defense, claimed Mendoza suffered from dissociative episodes triggered by rejection, theorizing that some perceived slight from Rachelle had activated violent impulses beyond his control. Before we continue, I need to ask you something important. Why haven't you subscribed yet? Is it the content? The delivery? Let me know in the comments below what's holding you back. These stories contain critical information that could help protect you or someone you love. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with their verdict: guilty of capital murder in the first degree. During the sentencing phase, Rachelle's mother addressed the court, holding a photo. "My granddaughter will never know her mother except through stories we tell and pictures we show her. No punishment can undo that reality, but justice demands accountability for this deliberate cruelty." On February 8, 2005, Judge Harrison delivered the sentence: death by lethal injection. Mendoza showed no visible reaction as the judgment was read. As officers led him from the courtroom, Rachelle's father stood silently, watching the man who had destroyed his family begin his long journey toward execution. The wheels of justice had turned, but for the Tolleson family, the pain was just beginning. And for Moises Mendoza, a 2-decade wait on death row lay ahead. Huntsville State Penitentiary houses Texas death row inmates in the Allen B. Polunsky Unit, a facility designed to eliminate almost all human contact. For Moises Mendoza, this became home on March 2, 2005. The reality of death row bears no resemblance to Hollywood portrayals. Each 60-square-foot concrete cell contains a metal bed, stainless steel toilet, and small writing desk bolted to the wall. No television, no radio, no internet. 23 hours daily spent in this concrete box. 1 hour for solitary exercise in a cage twice the size of the cell. Meals delivered through a narrow slot in the door. Communication with other inmates limited to shouting through air vents or along corridors. What would 2 decades of knowing your death date do to your mind? Would you find peace or collapse under the psychological weight? Prison guard Manuel Rodriguez observed Mendoza throughout his incarceration. When he first arrived, he was defiant, refused to follow basic instructions. Around year 3, something shifted. He became quieter, more introspective, started reading philosophy books from the prison library, began writing letters, hundreds of them. Those letters, obtained through Freedom of Information requests, reveal Mendoza's psychological transformation. Early correspondence focused on proclaiming innocence and blaming others. By 2010, a different tone emerged. "I dream about her face every night," he wrote to his mother. "Not as she was at the end, but as she was alive. Sometimes she's holding her baby. I wake up choking on guilt." Between 2005 and 2022, Mendoza's legal team filed 17 appeals. Each challenged different aspects of his conviction: claims of improper evidence handling, allegations of jury bias, questions about his mental competency during trial. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals rejected 15. The final 2 reached the United States Supreme Court, which declined to hear both cases. Prison psychologist Dr. James Wheeler conducted quarterly evaluations throughout Mendoza's confinement. His clinical notes documented a gradual acceptance of responsibility. Subject has progressed from complete denial to acknowledging actions while minimizing intent, and finally to expressing profound remorse. This progression, though not uncommon among long-term death row inmates, appears genuine rather than performative. In 2018, Mendoza participated in a restorative justice program, writing a 47-page statement addressed to Rachelle's family. While they declined to read it, prison officials noted its contents contained detailed acknowledgement of the crime without justification, expression of deep remorse, and acceptance of the punishment to come. Former death row chaplain Reverend Thomas Mitchell spent hundreds of hours with Mendoza in his final years. Most men facing execution follow a similar path: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. Moises reached that final stage around year 15. He stopped fighting the inevitable and began preparing for it. As 2025 approached, bringing with it his scheduled execution date, Mendoza focused increasingly on making peace with his fate. Prison records show he declined final appeals opportunities, instead requesting meetings with religious counselors from various faiths. His commissary purchases shifted from food items to writing materials and stamps, as he composed final letters to family members. Have you ever considered how you would spend your time if you knew exactly when your life would end? Would you fight until the final moment or surrender to the inevitable? For Moises Mendoza, the answer came in simple daily rituals: meditation at dawn, writing throughout the day, and reading philosophical texts until lights out. As April 23, 2025 approached, he began giving away his few possessions to other inmates. The countdown to his final day had begun. April 23, 2025 began like any other day at Huntsville State Penitentiary. The metallic clang of cell doors opening at 5 a.m., the shuffle of feet in hallways, the distant murmur of prison operations. But for Moises Mendoza, this ordinary dawn held extraordinary significance. It marked the beginning of his final day on Earth. At 5:45 a.m., Execution Protocol 27B officially commenced. Officers escorted Mendoza from death row to the holding cell adjacent to the execution chamber, a small room painted institutional beige where condemned prisoners spend their final hours. The guards' demeanor shifted subtly. Their usual authoritative stance softened with an almost imperceptible humanity. They had performed this ritual dozens of times before, yet the gravity never diminished. He walked steadily, head high, recalled Officer James Preston. Some men collapse emotionally on that walk. Others become aggressive. Mendoza seemed resolved. Inside the holding cell, a single bed, metal toilet, and small desk awaited. On the desk lay a notepad, pen, and Bible, standard items provided to all condemned prisoners. Mendoza requested an additional item, a small photograph of his mother. This photograph, the only personal possession allowed, remained clutched in his hand for most of the morning. At 10 a.m., he met with his attorney for the final time. Their conversation, though private, lasted precisely 43 minutes according to the prison log. When the attorney departed, witnesses noted moisture in his eyes, a rare break in professional composure. How would you spend your final hours if all possibilities had been reduced to a countdown? What thoughts would occupy your mind as the minutes ticked away? Prison regulations allow condemned prisoners to select a last meal within reasonable boundaries. This ritual, practiced across many execution protocols worldwide, represents one final choice granted to someone whose agency has otherwise been completely stripped away. At 11:30 a.m., Mendoza received his requested meal: crispy southern fried chicken with visible herbs speckling the golden coating. Creamy mashed potatoes formed perfect peaks under rich brown gravy. A portion of collard greens sat alongside, their deep color suggesting slow cooking with traditional seasonings. For dessert, a generous slice of peach cobbler, the fruit visible beneath a golden crust. A tall glass of unsweetened iced tea completed the meal. He ate slowly, methodically, noted the supervising officer. Many barely touched their last meal due to anxiety. Mendoza consumed every bite, pausing between each as if committing the flavors to memory. The psychological significance of his food choices didn't escape prison officials. These weren't exotic delicacies or excessive indulgences. They were comfort foods with cultural connections, dishes that evoked home, childhood, and normalcy. In his final hours, Mendoza reached not for extravagance but for familiarity. At 1 p.m., visitors arrived: his mother, younger sister, and an elderly aunt. The visitation room for death row contains a thick glass barrier. No physical contact is permitted. For 2 hours, they spoke through telephone handsets, their conversations punctuated by tears and long silences. His mother pressed her palm against the glass. Mendoza mirrored the gesture from his side, their hands separated by impenetrable barriers. Have you ever tried to find the perfect words to say goodbye? How do you compress a lifetime of feelings into one final conversation? As afternoon faded into evening, religious counseling followed. Father Michael Reyes spent an hour with Mendoza, later describing him as a man who had made peace with both his actions and his fate. The priest administered last rites at Mendoza's request, despite his inconsistent religious practice throughout his incarceration. At 5 p.m., the final countdown began. Medical personnel arrived to examine Mendoza, confirming his physical readiness for execution. An ironic medical assessment to ensure his health before deliberately ending his life. They inserted the preliminary 4-line that would later deliver the lethal chemicals, taping it securely to his arm. By 6 p.m., witnesses began assembling in the observation room. Rachelle's parents and brother, selected journalists, prison officials, and Mendoza's lawyer. The execution chamber awaited its occupant. A single gurney with leather restraints, surrounded by medical equipment and observed through large windows. What can a condemned man's final choices reveal about human nature? And what will his last words tell us about redemption? At precisely 6:30 p.m., 4 officers escorted Moises Mendoza into the execution chamber. His steps were measured, his breathing controlled. The witnesses observed through glass partitions as officers secured him to the gurney with 5 leather straps. Ankles, wrists, and torso. The fluorescent lighting cast everything in stark relief, leaving nowhere for emotions to hide. Warden Michael Thompson stood at the head of the gurney, official protocol document in hand. Moises Mendoza, you have been sentenced to death by lethal injection for the capital murder of Rachelle Tolleson. Do you have any final statement? The microphone above Mendoza's head captured his words for the official record. His voice emerged steady, lacking the tremor one might expect from a man moments from death. I am deeply sorry for the endless pain and suffering I have caused, he began, eyes finding Rachelle's family behind the glass. To the family of Rachelle Tolleson, no words can undo the harm I've wrought. I pray that you find the strength to heal the wounds this tragedy has inflicted. He paused, breathing deeply, then continued with a shift to his native language. Estoy en paz. I am at peace. The choice to conclude in Spanish reflected his dual identity, his final communication bridging his American present and Mexican heritage. Prison psychologists later noted this linguistic choice often represents a return to fundamental identity in moments of extreme stress. Rachelle's mother remained expressionless, her hand gripping her husband's. Her father stared directly at Mendoza, his jaw clenched tight enough that a witness later described visible tension in his temples. Neither spoke nor gestured in response. At 6:37 p.m., Warden Thompson nodded to the execution team positioned behind a partition. The lethal injection process began with sodium thiopental flowing through the foreline, a sedative to render Mendoza unconscious. His eyelids fluttered briefly before closing. Next came pancuronium bromide to paralyze his respiratory system, followed by potassium chloride to stop his heart. By 6:42 p.m., the prison physician approached the gurney, placing a stethoscope against Mendoza's chest. After 30 seconds of listening, he turned to the warden and nodded. Time of death, 6:42 p.m., the warden announced. The curtains closed on the viewing windows, and the witnesses were escorted out. These stories contain lessons that might save lives. The warning signs, the behavioral patterns, the escalation of dangerous obsession. Recognizing these could protect you or someone you love. If you're not subscribed, you're missing crucial insights that could make the difference between safety and tragedy. The knowledge gained from understanding these cases extends beyond morbid curiosity. It builds awareness that may prevent future victims. As journalists filed out to report on the execution, Rachelle's family embraced in a private room, their 2-decade wait for legal closure finally complete. The morning after Mendoza's execution, Farmersville awoke to headlines announcing the final chapter of a saga that had defined their community for over 2 decades. Outside the Tolleson family home, neighbors left flowers, candles, and handwritten notes, a community ritual of collective remembrance. Michael Tolleson, Rachelle's father, addressed reporters briefly. Today marks not a celebration, but the end of one painful chapter. Our focus now returns to honoring Rachelle's memory through the foundation we established in her name. The Rachelle Tolleson Memorial Foundation, created in 2010, provides counseling services and educational support for children who have lost parents to violent crime. For the Tolleson family, transforming their grief into action became a crucial part of their healing journey. Rachelle's daughter Avery, now 21, older than her mother was at death, has become the foundation's most powerful advocate. I never knew my mother except through photographs and stories, she told supporters at a fundraising event. But through this work, I've come to understand her compassion and strength. Meanwhile, Farmersville itself remained divided in its response to the execution. Main Street businesses displayed purple ribbons, Rachelle's favorite color, in solemn acknowledgement. Yet prayer vigils organized by anti-death penalty activists drew substantial attendance as well. Mayor Eleanor Richardson observed this division. Our community continues to grapple with competing notions of justice. Some see the execution as necessary closure, others as a perpetuation of violence. Both perspectives stem from a shared desire for a world where such tragedies never occur. The case ignited renewed debate about capital punishment across Texas. Supporters pointed to the deliberate nature of Mendoza's crime and the exhaustive appeals process as evidence of a functioning justice system. State Senator James Thornton told constituents, "This case demonstrates exactly why the death penalty exists, to provide ultimate accountability for the most heinous crimes." Opponents countered with economic and moral arguments. Professor Maria Gonzalez of Texas State University noted, "The 21 years between conviction and execution cost taxpayers approximately $3.7 million, nearly triple the cost of life imprisonment. This financial burden alone should prompt reconsideration, even before addressing ethical concerns." If you've watched this far and still haven't subscribed, I have to ask, what are you waiting for? The subscribe button is right there, and it costs you nothing but gives you everything. These stories provide crucial insights into human behavior that might one day protect you or someone you love. The story of Moises Mendoza and Rachelle Tolleson transcends simple true crime narrative. It holds critical lessons about human behavior, justice, and the ripple effects of violence that extend decades beyond the original act. First, recognize that dangerous individuals rarely announce themselves. Mendoza maintained a normal appearance while harboring violent obsessions. The disconnect between his outward behavior and inner thoughts should remind us to trust our instincts when something feels wrong in an interaction. Second, understand that justice takes different forms for different people. For some of Rachelle's family members, the execution brought closure. For others, no punishment could fill the void left by her absence. True healing began only when they channeled grief into helping others through their foundation. Third, communities affected by violence must find their own path forward. Farmersville continues to honor Rachelle's memory not through dwelling on her death, but by celebrating the life she lived and the daughter who carries her legacy. Perhaps the most profound lesson comes from Avery Tolleson, who transformed her personal tragedy into purpose. "I could spend my life defined by what was taken from me, or I could create meaning from it. I choose meaning." The choices we make when confronting darkness define us. Will we succumb to fear, seek vengeance, or find ways to prevent future tragedies through awareness and education? Like, subscribe, and share this video to help others learn from these crucial life lessons. Your engagement might help someone recognize warning signs before tragedy strikes. Together, we can transform these painful stories into protective knowledge.